Happy Monday, guys. Today is September 28th. My name is Will, and these are my thoughts. So, on this channel and outside of it, there's been a lot of talk recently about sports coming back. And not only are they back now, but several of them, including the NHL, MLB, and NBA, are either just heading into their playoffs or wrapping them up. And while all of that makes for very exciting television, there was a time very recently where we didn't think any of that was going to be able to happen. And if it did, we didn't know what it was going to look like or how people were going to react to it. And it was particularly sucky because most of those leagues were either completely done or almost done with their months long regular seasons and looked like they weren't going to have an opportunity to finish them. But even if they came back and did finish them, could we really say that whoever won the Corona bubble was the champion of that particular season? Like over in England, Liverpool had a 20-plus point lead on the rest of the league. But if they came back and finished the season in what would have to be pretty irregular conditions, or just decided to cancel it altogether, could we really call them the champions? Now, I know a whole bunch of y'all watched The Last Dance in quarantine, because you should. It's great. But while I was watching it, I couldn't help but think if the Lakers come back and win this championship, which it looks like they're in a very good position to do, are people around the country going to give LeBron as much credit for this ring as they did for his three other ones? Or is this going to be the coronavirus title? And the question that I'm really asking there is, are any of these championships going to need a qualifier? Will they have an asterisk? The dictionary defines an asterisk as a symbol used to mark printed or written text, typically as a reference to an annotation or to stand for omitted matter. And yes, before somebody says something snarky, I did just unironically use the dictionary definition cliche. This is my show and I do what I want. But normally when you see an asterisk, it's because you need to know something additional to what's actually in the text. A little bit of added information or context that will make the rest of what you're reading make sense. It may not fit into the natural flow of that specific article, but it's still important. And that kind of asterisk is a good idea. But asterisks don't really work that way in sports. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. And this is going to take some explaining, so bear with me. The most famous asterisk in American sports, arguably, is for Roger Maris's home run record back in 1961. He broke Babe Ruth's record, set all the way back in 1927. But because Maris was playing in the first 162-game season baseball had ever had, as opposed to a 154-game season like Ruth in 1927, Baseball Commissioner Ford Frick decided that it shouldn't count. Not really, anyway. And there are a lot of reasons for this, but the asterisk on Maris's record is still a pretty hotly contested issue 60 years later. But it also helps to make my point about them, which is that when you consider what asterisks are supposed to do versus what they end up accomplishing, they're kind of useless. Like, let's just entertain that idea from baseball's perspective. Why would they want to put an asterisk on Maris's record? They would probably say that it was for the sake of fairness, which is the most common argument you hear around them. Maris played more games than Ruth. Their seasons were fundamentally different, so it's unfair to compare them directly. But, what was he supposed to do? Take a week off out of respect? I mean, he pretty much could have. The Yankees won 109 games in 1961. I guess that's what happens when the guy breaking the home run record is your third best player at best. But that seems to suggest that records shouldn't be changed over time, irrespective of change in the sport itself. We have single season record holders for things like sacks in football and three-pointers in basketball, which, strictly speaking, didn't exist for the majority of their league's history. Should we have to put an asterisk on those? Well, no, because if we thought about it like that, we'd have to use a lot more asterisks. I do think we use them to legislate something, but it's not fairness, no matter what baseball would have you believe. I would argue that asterisks are about legislating legacy, which, if the success of Hamilton has taught us anything, is an idea that Americans are obsessed with. Let's go back to the Last Dance example for a second. Such is the legacy and the allure of the 90s Bulls that millions of us watched a 10-part documentary about something that started more than 30 years ago. Legacy is powerful, and in a perfect world, an asterisk is supposed to show that a legacy has been tarnished by something outside the laws of the sport itself. And that's an okay idea in a vacuum, but if you dig a little deeper, it starts to break down. Firstly, because I would argue that fairness is a completely arbitrary idea. Barry Bonds used steroids for years, And he doesn't have an asterisk by his home run record. None of the Mitchell Report guys do. That's a pretty easy example to use, but here's one that might trigger some people. These guys cheated a whole bunch, but I don't think anyone's coming to take any of TB12's rings anytime soon. Asterisks are ineffective, first and foremost, because they don't actually address fairness. If anything, they say more about the fairness of the people distributing them. And when it comes to legacy, the thing that I would say they're trying to change, they're even worse at doing their jobs. There are entire seasons of college sports that have just been asterisked out of existence. But think about that for a second. Just because you take away USC's national title and Reggie Bush's Heisman, does that mean you've diminished their legacy the way you wanted to? I would argue that it doesn't. We all saw them. We know that they were the best team by a country mile in 2004, and that Bush was the best player in the country in 2005. And when it comes down to it, isn't that what legacy is all about? Because of things like trophies and award ceremonies, we think that these things are actual tactile events. But I would argue that sports and celebrating them largely exists in the minds of the people that take them in. What is legacy other than the things that we remember about the things we've seen? You could use the same argument with the Fab Five at Michigan. You can't dictate or legislate how a player or a team leaves an impact on the people that watch them. In the end, asterisks are just lame attempts to control narrative. But what the people who would try and change those narratives underestimate is the extent to which none of that belongs to them. It belongs to us. Cheating is bad. We know that. Playing more games provides the opportunity to hit more home runs. We know that too. Liverpool are worthy champions this season, and whoever wins the NBA title will be too. Like Roger Maris, they will have navigated everything that was in front of them the same as everyone else. And like USC and Reggie Bush, we'll remember them being the best, regardless of any changes that could be made to the record book. I don't believe in asterisks. They tell a black and white story in a world that's got a whole lot of gray. I'm Will. Those are my thoughts, and I'll see you guys next Monday.